Good morning, everybody. Today, through my talk, we'll try to understand the development of hypoxia in seasonally hypoxic coastal basin and the role of water column and sediment in it. Why we need to understand and study this? Because the oxygen inventory of global ocean has decreased 2% in last 50 years. That means some of the oxic region will go hypoxic to anoxic. These effects are more severe in coastal regions. Two of the main reasons for that is eutrophication, which induce lot of oxygen consumption in the water column and in the sediment, and the global warming, which increases the sea surface temperature, which increases stratification that prevents the oxic surface layer to mix with the deeper layers. The oxygen consumption happens in water column and in the sediment. The sediment is more important in shallow water regions such as in estuaries and shelf compared to open ocean where the water depth is much higher or much deeper. So it's very important to understand the development of hypoxia. To understand that, there are two major factors or two fundamental factors. One is supply and demand. How much oxygen is getting supplied inside the ocean, in the ocean interior, and what is the demand, and the contribution of different components which consumes the oxygen, such as water and sediment. For this study, we'll be using Bedford Basin as a model system. So Bedford Basin is, as many of us know, that it's right beside Halifax Harbor, and this is a seasonally stratified coastal basin. Mm, this is also a time series station maintained by BIO, Bedford Institute of Oceanography, um, who are collecting um, water properties data since 1992. So if we just look at the climatology of this station, of the deep of the 60 meter, which is the deepest point of this station, we can see there is this nice seasonality in the oxygen concentration. In the winter, the deep water gets oxic due to winter mixing, and then slowly goes hypoxic, mm, uh, just like a natural experiment. However, if you look at the end of the year or in the fall of every year, the oxygen concentration is much more variable. The reason for this is that fall intrusions. Fall intrusions is an infrequent event which affects only the deeper water, essentially water from the Scotian shelf, which is heavier uh, and more oxic, enters the basin and sits in the bottom, and this is a fast event. uh, to understand the oxygen dynamics, we need to understand both of these processes so that we have a complete understanding. So we need monitoring. The monitoring is being done by Bedford Basin Monitoring Program by BIO, and the data is easily available. And we deployed a benthic pod in 2018 in hope to capture some of those intrusion events that happens. So there's this benthic instrument pod has a CTD and oxygen sensor which records high resolution data. We also collected sediment core samples seasonally in 2019, uh, which we used to understand the sediment processes in more details and modeling. Here is the oxygen concentration throughout 2018 and 19. You can see that 2018 we saw two intrusion events. On contrary, we did not observe any intrusion event in 2019. So these are the time points we went on the field to collect sediment core. So our goal is to develop a oxygen model for Bedford Basin. So this is the microsensor profiles that we have collected from different months: February, May, August, and November, and these are the corresponding days, field days, water column oxygen concentration, just for reference. So we want to develop a coupled sediment, water sediment, oxygen model. So we approached this problem with a reactive transport model. So these are the two basic equations that we will be using. So this is for water and this is for sediment. The first term is the transport term, and this second term is the consumption term. Uh, Here kz is the eddy diffusion, and here the consumption, which we have some idea, the kz, the eddy diffusivity, we have some idea about it from previous works on Bedford Basin. And the consumption term, we have set it as a function of chlorophyll concentration, which varies with time and which can be monitored easily, the surface chlorophyll concentration. This particular constant is unknown here. Similarly, in the sediment, this is the diffusive transport term, and this is the consumption term. Here, this one is also unknown. However, we can estimate this particular constant from our sediment uh, microsensor profiles, oxygen microsensor profiles, which is and that will leave us with only one unknown, which we can determine through numerical modeling, numerical model fit. So to understand, to get the sediment rate of sediment oxygen consumption, we fit a diffusive reactive equation to the microsensor profile, and we can get that particular constant, rate constant. We did it for all our micro profiles, and we saw that we did not find any clear seasonality. Therefore, we can assume that the rate of sediment oxygen consumption is kind of same throughout the year. So when we use all those parameters in our model, we can predict the water column oxygen consumption, pardon me, water column oxygen concentration throughout the year, and also the sediment oxygen concentration. You can see that these points with error bar are the oxygen penetration depth that we measured from our microsensor profile, which kind of which closely match the model result. Also, for comparison, this is the model output of this is the comparison of observed oxygen concentration at different depths in the Bedford Basin with the model output, which which you can see that we very well mm, predicted the oxygen dynamics in the basin. And this is the benthic oxygen uptake from the model, which is very close to the observed one. So we predicted, the model predicted the seasonal hypoxia very well. We got a oxygen water column respiration term, which is very close to the one reported from the basin in previous studies. We also identified stratification plays a very important role, and for the deepest region of the basin, we calculated that 22% of the oxygen consumption happens in the sediment. We also found that with as the water gets shallower, the sediment contribution in oxygen consumption increases exponentially. So this particular modeling study, uh, you know, some of the takeaway point from this particular study is that from from some basic of understanding, such as good understanding of the mixing and surface chlorophyll concentration, we can predict the oxygen dynamics in the basin, in the deep basin as well as in the sediment. This will also provide us with a good model framework uh, to understand other several other biogeochemical processes which are oxygen sensitive, such as nitrogen cycle, such as nitrogen cycle. Now let's look at what happens in the intrusion, during the intrusion. This is the pod data that we have got in 2018. You can see there is this sharp increase in oxygen concentration along with temperature and salinity. So this is a different water mass that is coming here. So now we modified our model to understand what exactly happening at that point when the intrusion happens. So now let's see what exactly happens. So you can see that this intrusion happens in a matter of few hours, and you can see the oxygen benthic oxygen uptake increases almost tenfold uh, with the intrusion. Similarly, the sediment also gets pretty much highly oxygenated. The top layers gets highly oxygenated with the intrusion. So the future questions would be, what happens to nitrification and denitrification, which are very oxygen sensitive reactions during these quick events. So in summary, we can uh, we can see that these models can be used to address several process based questions. Also, the previous works from Bedford Basin gives us a um, very useful information about model constraint and validation, and using some of that, we developed a tool to understand the oxygen dynamics in Bedford Basin and linked it to the climate events, which would eventually controls the oxygen inventory in the deeper part of the ocean. This also highlights the importance of benthic processes in shallow water settings, and also gives the scope to extend this kind of modeling study to 2D and 3D space, which would be very useful in forecasting Halifax Harbor water quality and oxygen. Thank you, and thank you for listening, and I'm open to questions.